Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning,
where it's always morning somewhere. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jen. And we are excited today to talk about difficult conversations.
That's right. Those tough conversations that we sometimes just don't want to be part of.
Sometimes having difficult or intense or high stakes conversations, however you want to term them.
Yeah.
Is really kind of scary and seems really intense. And it feels like a lot of those are like really relevant today. Like there is a lot of it to go around.
Yes.
We talk about how we feel like it's just yelling across the chasm.
Yeah.
And we hate that. We're all about trying to figure out how to solve that because it solves nothing. Division, what united we stand, divided we fall. That's what
Correct.
we said from childhood growing up and applies in any situation. So I know I certainly have found myself on both feeling attacked and then also feeling like I didn't do my best job representing myself. Or also my tendency is just to like be quiet and ignore. And we'll talk about how that's maybe not the best way either, right?
Yeah, may not be the best tactic.
Yeah, but before we get into all of that and break down some tips and skills and the science behind difficult conversations, let's start with gratitude.
Always where we start.
Always. Why don't you kick us off?
So I have so much gratitude for my husband. I miss him dearly. He has been taking care of family things, and it has left me here by myself, taking care of the plants, which I don't really do well, but they've all survived so far, knock on wood. And then taking care of the birds. He has Ollie, so I am like really here alone. Me, the birds, and the plants. So I'm excited because they come home. They get here tomorrow morning, so I'm so excited to have them back. I just, fondness makes the heart grow. Wait, what is that saying?
Distance makes the heart grow fonder.
That's the one.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Fondness makes the heart grow distant? No, can't be that.
But I'm just happy that they are going to be back. I'm excited. I've missed them. It's been like a week and a half. No, it's been longer than that since I've seen them. I've been home for like a week and a half, but I was with y'all before I came here. So it's really been several. It's been like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So just ready to have them home. And, he helps make it a home, him and Ollie. So I am grateful for them and looking forward to their arrival tomorrow morning.
I am excited. I can't wait to hear about how you all run into each other's arms. And I'm sure he'll have some great stories about travel. So can't wait for that too. And I'm sure he's been missing you as well. So.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? I mean, I miss you.
See?
I've been trying to get you to come back ever since
you
you left.
You sure have.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we just reroute his plane and y'all can just meet here?
No. But thank you.
I feel like we need to have a difficult conversation. You don't want to be here?
Nope. It is finally fall time here, and I am loving the weather. I am loving the trees turning colors. I am not going to go back there when it's nice. So nice here.
It's nice right now. It's like 50 something this morning, high of 70, low 70s. Still
not gonna go.
Yeah. Okay.
You come here.
It is my turn. I mean, it is my turn. You were here last, so it's my turn. Well, I am just have a super fun gratitude moment today. We got the opportunity to go to a community theater this weekend, and it was such a great time. I have some friends that are super into theater and actually got to see 2 shows with them in the past week, which has been really great. I'm super grateful for them just constantly. I just have to show up. They just, hey, do you want to do this? I just say yes. Yes, sure. Give me the details.
I'm in.
I didn't even drive. Like they just pick us up.
Love that.
All I have to do is show up, which is so great because time and space being a mystery, sometimes that's a challenge. So I'm super grateful for them and for them bringing this little spice and fun to my life. But I'm also just incredibly grateful for the people that put themselves out there and invest in community theater. It was just such a fun experience. The show we saw is called Cleavage. which is like a history of like breast augmentation.
Oh,
It was
interesting.
just like super informative, but it was hilarious. And the actors totally made the show as well, just with some of their performances. It was just such a bright spot and, a little moment of joy. Just my gratitude to all of the people in the performing arts space, and particularly those that get involved in community theater, which makes theater super accessible
Yeah.
for everybody. I mean, I was just like, man, this was like, I would have paid more for these tickets, but I'm so glad that it's so accessible and people can enjoy art and theater in this way. So that was great.
That's awesome. That's a great gratitude moment.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I was sitting there thinking, this would be a really fun hobby to get into. Just the comments made earlier this morning, I really was thinking about that.
So is Jen going to show up on
I
a
don't know.
community theater stage?
A little bit of imposter syndrome there, so I don't know about that.
Well, let's move this conversation into the hottest of topics today.
Yeah. So, Chris, why do tough conversations sometimes feel like a lion attack to your brain? Because it really does, right?
It
like
does.
Just this, like you're on a jungle safari. We want to talk about how to engage in disagreement with empathy, curiosity, and a little less nervous system chaos that goes on. I talked about there is this temptation, at least for me, to just avoid tricky topics for the sake of keeping the peace. What I recently have been experiencing and realizing, probably after reading this Boundaries book, is, or making my way through it, is that by suppressing those thoughts and feelings and just avoiding the conversation and allowing other people to kind of continue to say things that feel harmful and just avoiding it, you're really just pushing down the feelings and the emotions, and you're ripe for like the explosion that happens, which I think we see sometimes. So I've been realizing that I, of all people, didn't think I would be saying I need to find my voice. And yet I find myself in this place where I've been going, I really need to find my voice. You and I have talked about that recently, where you've been going, wow, this isn't like you.
What are you talking about, Jen? Not having thoughts, feelings, and opinions to share? I don't know what you speak of.
Yeah. No, I have them to share. I just tend to avoid them when I feel like it's going to be, something that is like high conflict. Not in like, I mean, if you were to ask my husband, he'd be like, oh no, she's perfectly fine taking me to task for whatever. Whether she's right or wrong, she's convicted. He wouldn't actually say that out loud, but he would probably think it. But, I do find whether it's, on social media and I think where I really started to realize my silence in these topics is when we were continuing to engage in Pride Kelso and all of the rhetoric that started to come out around that, and like the blatant and clear harmful misinformation. I just was like, I cannot be silent anymore. I don't care who this ruffles feathers of. Not that I was going out to, with the intention of seeking to ruffle feathers, but like I am more disturbed by the misinformation than I am afraid of getting stuck in a difficult conversation.
Right. Well, and I do think that based on like everyone's comfortability is going to be different. So your willingness to engage and how to engage is also going to feel very different. I think as we go through this conversation today, these things are really lean towards like the actual verbal conversations that you have with people. But I think a lot of the tactics can also be pulled into
how we engage on social.
Correct.
And, I get really fired up by some of these topics and I decide I'm just going to go, have these conversations, because when we shut down the conversation, we shut down our opportunity for empathy, for learning, for connection.
Right.
But, as I am triggered and because I've been silent on the topics and then all of a sudden I'm moved into action, like, do you think that I'm really starting to show up from a place of curiosity here, or am I showing up with a bullhorn against my lips? ready to just say what I feel like has been, growing and pushed down for so long. So I do think it's really important that we remind ourselves, all of us included, including me, none of us are perfect at this. None of us can be perfect all the time. But what we aspire to be is, at least for me, always entering these high stakes or difficult or conflict-ridden conversations from a place of empathy, learning, and connection, or a place of curiosity and a desire to relate. Does not mean that you have to be willing to, entering a conversation from a point of curiosity and a desire to relate to somebody does not mean that you are saying, oh, I may change my opinion by the time I get out of this conversation. I think that's why a lot of people may avoid them or get really heated in the midst of them, is this, I'm not going to change my opinion. But to listen to somebody and truly hear where they're coming from and understand and relate to them does not mean that you have to be in a place where you're willing to change your point of view.
Right.
It's really just about understanding how the other person can get there. And I think what we tend to do is villainize each other when we have these strongly held opposing beliefs. Then we get caught up in this heroes and villains scenario.
Yeah.
Once you have made it into a heroes and villains scenario, how can you possibly have a conversation where you're both standing on equal ground, right? When everyone thinks they're the hero and everyone thinks everyone else is the villain.
Exactly. And I think that's so at least when I grew up, I remember hearing things like, you don't talk about religion and politics at dinner. You don't, there are just certain topics that you didn't discuss. And I feel like we are now in this world where that is not something that is abided by.
Yeah.
People have kind of put it off to the wayside, which is totally fine. But I think people have to be willing to engage in the conversation and understand that you may not be walking away from that conversation having changed anyone's mind, having what is the intent of the conversation that you're going in to have. And I think, like you're saying, if you enter a conversation with curiosity, wanting to learn more, wanting to hear more from another person's perspective, it creates those opportunities to connect. We all want to connect with people. We all want to feel like we belong within our community, within our friend groups. And if we are willing to engage in some of these conversations, we may even just get enriched a little bit more and have a deeper understanding of something, even if we choose not to take that as our truth.
Yeah, but what I think is interesting is, the Neuroleadership Institute and Dr. David D. Rock talks about this in-group, out-group thinking. And while we're predisposed for this human connection, while that looks different in every person, this kind of need for social connection, it is, we tend to not want to create that social connection with people that we put in the out group.
Correct.
By creating this heroes, villains sort of scenario, we are developing these in-groups and out-groups. And what we do is tend to just automatically filter thoughts and opinions and such based on whether you're in my in-group or you're in my out-group. And I find, even though I'm aware of this, I find myself doing this and I have to catch myself. So I go, this, and whether it's a political figure or a religious figure or a whatever, this person who I disagree with said this thing or did this thing, so it is inherently something I disagree with. And I have to go, wait a second, that's not the way that we figure this out. It's really the content that matters, and it doesn't matter where it originated from. I mean, you got to kind of keep context in mind and things like that. But just at the basic level, this kind of in-group and out-group thinking, it's why people in politics, you tend to have people that associate with one party a certain set of news channels, and people that associate with another party a certain set of news channels. It's because they've been identified as the in-group or the out-group for that party. They're going to believe what they hear on those news channels. Not that anyone is doing any further vetting of any of the news. This is where I have to go, wait a second, I don't want to get caught up in that. And it does require a little more work and a lot more mental awareness, because that is just a part of how the brain tends to get comfortable, is this in-group and out-group thinking. But becoming aware of that, I think, is really important. What we do know, and I think, Chris, you and I know this from our career and what we've done for a living, feeling heard actually calms the brain's threat response. So when you're dealing with a person who is, in a upset situation, what we've been taught is how to mirror back what they're saying.
Right.
Let them know, acknowledge, nod your head, let them know that they've been heard, because it takes them from escalated up here to de-escalating. It doesn't mean that you're agreeing. It means that you're hearing what they say. And I know my husband uses this trick on me. He's really good at this. It's not like he's not being tricky, but he does this really well, where I will be really upset and I'll be saying something and I'll feel like he's just blowing me off or something because I'm the expressive and he's not. And then he'll tell me, no, I did. I heard you say this. This is how you said you feel. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yes. Like I can recall physically taking a breath and going, okay, yes, I've been heard. Like he does hear me. He does hear. So that's the thing, is that I just want to be heard, even if we don't agree. And we know that social rejection and dismissal activate the same neural regions that experience physical pain. Right. So feeling unheard, particularly for an expressive, is like, stubbing your toe on the wall.
Right. And I think what's interesting is hearing the example that you gave between you and Ace is like this. That's someone like you live with. That's someone who like knows you. You two have been together for 100 years now.
Don't I look good for 100?
You look great. What is your secret? It's all the self-care. But I think what's super interesting about that exact thing is even when you are so close to someone, right? Like you can still feel like you are not being seen, you are not being heard. That person being able to verbalize that back to you, get you into that state of comfort so that you can engage in a level of conversation where it's like meeting everyone where they're at. Like when they are your out group or strangers or people who you don't consider close to you, like that can be really hard to actually take that step and press pause and try and figure that stuff out, because your brain is processing things just as quickly. It's trying to assess, like, is this a threat? Is this a threat to my identity? Is this a physical threat? We talked about it in a previous episode about how all of those, it's the same space in our brain that processes that physical pain. Is also what that social rejection looks and feels like. We actively try and avoid that because who wants to go through that pain? Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, like, not every moment is the right moment for a difficult conversation or a high stakes or a tense conversation or a disagreement type conversation. So you need to check in and go, okay, am I in the right headspace? Or, am I right now, do I have the capacity about me to be able to manage my feelings and my thoughts and be aware? I tend to be kind of impulsive and impatient and ready to just have the conversation in the middle of my feeling. Often not the best time to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So feel, pause, plan, act.
Accordingly.
Are you in a place where you can, is the other person like somebody where you can have a mutually respectful conversation? And if you don't know the answer, are you able to disengage yourself so that you don't get triggered, hooked, and caught up in all of that? Is it worth having the conversation? So I do think it's important to manage that temptation to just be silent, but also not every conversation always needs to be had. I need to look in the mirror when I say this, but like not every feeling that you have needs to be acted upon. Sometimes you do just pick your battles and let things go. Right. And that's like a great parenting lesson that you learn over time is how to choose your battles, because not all of them matter. And it applies in general. But I know we talk about that in a work context too. Like not every battle is a battle that's worth fighting. Sometimes you just let it go because it's not worth it.
Well, and I even think in the moment, like, so say I just had this example a couple of weeks with someone very close to me. Like we're having a discussion and it escalated very quickly. And I think both of us were unaware that it was happening so fast. And then finally I realized like, wow, I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm not feeling heard. All of these things, which obviously they were feeling the same way as well, because the behavior was very much so the same coming from their end. I just stopped. Like I stopped engaging. I I chose in that moment, like we're both talking, but neither one of us is hearing the other.
Yeah.
Let's just stop. I first stopped myself and then allowed them like to finish, and we were able to say, I think we both have mutual respect for one another, so let's take a pause. And we'll get to some tactics in a little bit, but I do like it can even happen in the moment. Like, yes, this is the right time, and then all of a sudden, ooh, this really is not going how it should. So let's take a pause.
Yeah. And, there's some neuroscience behind that. There is, so the prefrontal regions in your brain are associated with regulation. And when you're in this dysregulated state and your amygdala is typically involved in that, and you just are like not able to get yourself under control, your pulse is increasing, your hands are sweaty, my face gets red. So I have been sitting in somebody's office and I'm like obviously feeling myself get really upset.
Yeah.
And yet struggling to control it. And they're like, your face is red. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything about that. So we're going to have to talk about this later. So I'm not choosing it. It's just happening to me.
Right.
Sometimes you do have to take a pause and walk away. What we also know is that, so there's this thing called the polyvagal theory, this theory called the polyvagal theory. So kind of setting the stage for understanding why tense conversations tend to get imbalanced so quickly. There's this concept called neuroception. And that's the brain's involuntary and unconscious process of evaluating the environment for cues of safety or danger. So just subconsciously, like we've said, we are not wired for constant happiness. We are wired for threat identification and
survival.
Mitigating threats. That's how we are wired. And it's why when somebody's giving you feedback and they do the sandwich thing where they give you positive, negative, positive, and all you hear is the negative feedback, that's because that's what your brain is focusing on as a threat, and you are wired to mitigate that threat. We just have to recognize that that is how the brain works. So you can be triggered into that. You can trigger somebody else into that. And it's good to be aware that that's what's going on. So it's not personal. It feels really personal in the moment, doesn't it?
It sure does.
It feels really personal. And yet it's just science. It's like a part of what's happening. And I think the more that we normalize that and we understand that, the easier it is to de-escalate some of those escalating situations that happen. There is a concept also as a part of this theory called co-regulation. And co-regulation is when our nervous systems can influence each other. So if you notice, so I know I have received feedback in the past actually from a chief legal counsel who said to me, "You are so calm." And I just really appreciate that because it keeps this whole conversation just so calm. And I just thought, you think I'm calm? Like, I don't get that very often. But I walked into this conversation where I had to talk about something that had gone wrong and I needed to seek assistance from chief legal counsel, which is always a stressful situation.
Just a little bit.
I had done my work ahead of going into the conversation. And on the outside, I maintained this very calm voice. I prepared myself. So calm voice, even keel. I've got my facts in front of me. We can't change the past. Here are the facts. Here are the threats. Help me identify. Here are some potential solutions. How should we take this forward? And because I was able to manage that regulation ahead of time, it made that conversation easier for her. And that was something that she noted. I've noticed that too, when other people just keep a really calm demeanor on the outside, whether you feel that way on the inside or not, it helps you kind of be more calm. But, you've been around somebody that's getting escalated, and it takes work to remain calm, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that's one of the hardest, and it's probably why I believe this is why a lot of people avoid those types of conversations, because it is hard to regulate yourself and also have to try and manage someone else's emotions through the process.
For somebody else's emotions. I want to be really clear about that.
Correct. You are not responsible, but you do, when they start to show up, you will start reacting to them just as much as
to manage how you show up to their emotions.
Correct. Yeah. In this, it does feel so overwhelming, and I'm just going to put this off, or
Yeah.
I'm just not going to have this conversation. It's kind of the, I don't know, kind of like the calm, maybe a calm before the storm. And then you're like, nope, if we can put the storm off, we're going to do that.
So I feel like my husband is really good at more often than not regulating his emotional, physical response. And that often de-escalates a disagreement that we're having because he remains really calm and, you know, it doesn't always work immediately for me, but tends to kind of calm me back down or pull me back down. You notice that as you're interacting with other people, the way that your voice, your eye contact, your touch, although I don't necessarily suggest getting physically close to somebody that you're having a tough conversation with, but these are all things that can help co-regulate if you are trying to help keep a situation calm.
Right.
I always say, if you go in with vulnerability into a conversation and you just are trying to be really empathetic and vulnerable, like, is the other person really going to come out swinging and stay swinging? Maybe, but they're much less likely to do that if you just try to be like vulnerable and calm. So like when you make a mistake, if you say, look, I'm really sorry. I made this mistake. I apologize. It wasn't right. I realize this, and this. Like, they're much less likely to come out swinging than they are to say, oh, okay, like, thank you. So that is an example of co-regulation. And then the third thing here to know is just that experiences of severe adversity or trauma can lead to miscalibrated neuroconception, where the nervous system becomes chronically hypervigilant and stuck in this defensive state. It can make it feel difficult to feel that safe space, even when the objective threat is gone. So this is what we typically refer to as being triggered. So I think this is where listening at that kind of level 3 state, where you're listening with context and you're watching what's going on. So often we're all guilty of this. We think whatever the reaction is, it's about me. It's about me. It's about what I said. It's about what I'm doing. And yet the person who's reacting, like whatever's going on inside of them, is probably not about you at all. It's about them and what's going on for them and how they're feeling and what is informing their physical reaction that's going on. And I think it's good to be aware of that going into a high stakes conversation, because then you don't get caught up as easily into this trap of, oh, well, they're just responding to me, and then you start escalating together. So I think understanding the concept of neuroception, of co-regulation, and of trauma and what informs the way that people react is really helpful to kind of set the stage ahead of time so that you don't get as triggered, or if you do, what's going on and how to manage it.
Exactly. It's about understanding what our brains are hardwired to do, what they're going to do. And I always say, like, these are the things that are helpful in the planning of a conversation. So anytime that I have coached anyone about having a difficult conversation or one that they're not looking forward to, I encourage them to start at the place of what are the points that you're trying to get across, and make sure that you have them in such a way that you can get them across. So that
You
way,
mean I shouldn't just be scrolling and reacting to what I'm seeing?
correct.
I should think about it?
Because all of these things that are happening in our brain are going to happen in the moment as well, no matter how prepared you are for it. So if you at least have processed what you're wanting to say and what you're wanting to get across, you're ready for it. You've practiced those words. You have them written down ready for you. I also, when I work with managers, I do a lot of like role play with them and say, well, if the person says this, then this is what you can say. And if they say that, then this is what you can say. It's like a lot of times you're just trying to get comfortable in being uncomfortable to go into these conversations. And just, again, we've talked about this before. Unfortunately, there's not a pill. There's not a it is a skill. It is a practice. But when we understand what's happening in our minds, in our bodies, in things that we can't necessarily control, we can better show up for that person and for ourselves in these difficult conversations.
Yeah. And, I think usually how I would enter a conversation, whether it's a high stakes conversation or not, how I would enter a conversation in my natural state was just like, what do I want to accomplish? Very like focused on the cerebral part and not connected to the emotional part. And it takes intention. It takes intention for me to do this. So I have to be thinking about it because it's not my natural state. Even though I care about how people feel, actually stopping to say, okay, how do I want this other person to feel at the end of the conversation has been helpful for me in then how I set myself up for the tone. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I planned out anything any different, but just thinking about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Subconsciously impacts the energy that I bring into the conversation.
Yep.
Versus going in to get out of it what I wanted to get out of it.
Right.
And then being confused or surprised by how somebody felt.
Right.
Because I wasn't really focused or thinking about that. I also think it's really important before you enter a conversation to think about your intention of the conversation. So is your intention to have a debate? And if it is, like, make sure the other person feels the same way.
Say that, verbalize that. Let's debate this.
Is your intention to set a boundary, to give some feedback? Like, what is your intention for the conversation? Not just of how you want the other person to feel or how you want to feel, which is typically how we go into a conversation. I want to feel heard. But to set your intent. And it's okay if you say, I feel unheard, and at the end of this conversation, what I want is for you to hear me. I just want to feel heard. But I think it's important to think about that and then to say that up front because it helps the other person set their expectations too. So if you enter a conversation just trying to provoke a debate and the other person just feels attacked, like, I don't think you're going to get out of that conversation what you thought.
Right.
Or you're going to damage some relationships, right? So that's, I think, important.
I was going to say that whenever I've been in this state before where someone like was talking about something and it wasn't something that I was super passionate about. Like I didn't feel like I knew a lot about. And so, but I kept feeling like they just kept picking at me about it. And finally I just said to them, like, I don't understand what you want from me. Like I've shared what I do know. And they're like, well, I was really hoping just to like debate this with you. And I'm like, okay, well, had you told me that at the beginning of all of this, we probably could have had a very different conversation. But it is like one of those things that even in the moment, we can forget to like be mindful of the intention that we're wanting. Yeah. And we aren't seeing the reaction from the person that we're wanting or getting something from them that we were hoping for. And then it can kind of start to make things a little shaky or take it off the track, if you will. And then everyone's in an uncomfortable place because you're not getting the debate you wanted. I'm like, why are you wanting to debate me on this?
Yeah, like, well, I feel unprepared. This isn't,
right.
I feel like I have the underhand here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do also think it is really important both how you speak and how you listen in these conversations. So oftentimes I think people just subconsciously think that all of the effort needs to be put into the action of saying the words, and they don't think about listening as an action, but they're both important. So if we think about how you state your perspective or how you're responding or how you're speaking, some things that you can do to help the conversation be more effective is to use I statements versus accusatory language, because that accusatory language creates defensiveness. It does not help people feel heard, right?
Exactly.
I'm super guilty of this. I say you a lot, or I'll use an I statement that's really a you statement.
I start it with I and it ends with you.
Yeah. I feel like you are always blah, 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 blah. That's
exactly.
not really an I statement. Saying I feel unheard, not I feel like you don't hear me.
Right. Which is two very different things. And I think people need to be careful in these types of conversations not to put your feelings on somebody else. Because I think it is very easy for us to do that. But like you said earlier, you are not responsible for my feelings. And right. I don't know your intention if you have not been explicit about what your intention is. So I can't come for you for that.
I will say, if you are going, and I have been here, okay, well, I can't think of any I statements. All I'm getting back to are I statements, you statements disguised as I statements. That's probably a really good cue that this isn't the right moment for me to have the conversation. Like, I am in full threat, diminishing mode, and I am like, I can be an attack dog when I feel threatened.
Take a pause. Take a
pause. It might not be the right time for that conversation, but don't sit in the pause so long that you don't act on it, because it's just going to boil over at some point. Framing matters. So the brain is less likely to trigger a defensive response when language focuses on personal perspective rather than blame. So I talked about like being vulnerable, sharing your you need to be careful about, thoughtful, intentional about who you become really vulnerable with, but it's also helpful when you just are authentic and genuine and you show up and you just say like, look, here's where I'm at. This is how I feel. This is what I think. And it's much easier for somebody to meet you authentically in that space and be open when you are being open. But if you are being closed and defensive and on attack mode, obviously the other person is going to struggle not to get hooked up in that and be defensive and in attack mode. And then all you're doing is having a battle of who's the biggest attacker. Being somebody that can be assertive, I just end up feeling like a jerk at the end.
I do think that this is an important place to say, like, when you engage in conversations, whether it's one-on-one or in a group setting, like, you also have responsibility within that dynamic. So whether you are being an active participant, a passive watcher, or you're in there stirring the pot, like, whatever it may be, it's it's one of those things where you are physically there, you're present, and like there is likely to be a reaction. One, because you're experiencing thoughts, feelings, and opinions. The others involved in the conversation are as well. We all play a part, and if we are willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and share, like, look, when you said this is how it makes me feel, and I don't know your intent behind why you said that, but I can't help that I also have this reaction. I think when we are willing to be vulnerable like that, it does allow for us to see more into the inner workings of each other and creates those opportunities to, especially if it's like a friendship or something that you want to continue to grow, it allows you to figure out how to move forward. And I think that that's not always an easy thing to do.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to remember that, like, when you're entering into these conversations, if the intention is not to understand each other, if the intention is only to be understood, then that's how you get the yelling across the chasm.
Exactly.
So, you have to be willing to give what you're hoping to get.
Right.
So if you are hoping to be understood, you have to be willing to understand. And again, it does not mean that you have to change your opinion or be willing to change your opinion just to be willing to understand somebody. So I think that's really important. But mutual understanding rather than attacking each other is the goal in speaking. So if your words are not aimed at that goal, then you might want to revisit your plan.
Well, and I think when I think about this and like beyond just our inner dynamics of like how we engage with each other or with our friends, like if you think back to the movie Captain America Civil War, like this is where a lot of this tension was created, because Captain America and Iron Man were divided based on their perspectives on the Sokovia Accords. They both felt strongly in the positions that they held, and using those I believe statements to justify themselves, and they weren't just going at each other saying like you're wrong. It was more about what they believed and what they wanted to stand up for. And I think sometimes, like, right, this is a pop culture reference. It's not necessary. It's not that easy. How did that work out
in the end? Did they find alignment?
No, they continued to be divided, and however they understood in the bigger
of each other.
Correct. I think that's the big thing is you can understand people. You don't have to give up what you believe.
Yeah. You can respect and understand without agreeing. I do think that that's the piece that we often forget is the thing is, whether you agree or not, respect of another human is still important. And
Right.
it's so easy for us to play this villain game where we vilify somebody that we think is quote unquote threatening our beliefs, like how just because they believe differently. Is that necessarily the threat, or is it the actions that are
Right.
the threat? So, I think it's important to parse all of that out, because as soon as you villainize somebody who thinks differently than you do, then you're really closing yourself off.
Right.
And I know that if we look back to history, it is those individuals who can respect those that disagree with them and still try to understand where they're coming from, that end up being the most successful.
Yeah.
So
I do think this is like one of those areas that when we forget that the person standing across from us is another human being who has lived experiences, who have what they think and feel and believe just as strongly as the things that I do, it's because their lives have brought them to this point. When we start to villainize people, it starts to divide us. It starts to push us to where we don't seek to understand the other person. We don't want...
It's work. It's a lot of work, right? Sometimes you get tired of it, but we're all guilty of this on any side of the situation. Like name calling. I mean, my mama taught me you don't call names, and that's certainly, we see a lot of name calling going on.
Yep.
We see a lot of political jargon that is name calling disguised as political jargon. When you use words that aren't really name calling as name calling, that's still name calling.
Right.
And that vilifies people, right? It's not respecting people, and it happens on all sides. This is life.
Yeah, there's no one who's like,
but
we're not pointing out anyone.
When we start out by calling each other names or using their titles or terminology as names, do we really expect for that conversation to end in some kind of change or agreement? Right. Like, it's just going to end in the chasm widening. And again, I come back to united we stand, divided we fall. I said it every day in elementary school, Monday through Friday, every day school was in session. I think that's something that we have to remember, is that there is strength in unity, and unity isn't just created through agreement. You don't have to agree to be unified. You just have to respect each other. So let's talk about listening and the role of the listener in these conversations.
Yeah, so we've previously talked about the different levels of listening, which there are 3.
3. 1, 2, 3.
The first is listening for agreement. And
that's where most of us stay most of the time. Yeah. I'm
listening it's easy
to see whether I agree with you. And while I am listening, I am already preparing all of my responses for why I don't agree with you, and basically going to engage in some form of debate. And that is, while appropriate in certain situations, that is not how we should be listening all the time, and certainly not in a high stakes conversation. It's not going to serve you well. It's not going to get you where you want to go.
Exactly.
You already know the other person doesn't agree with you, so why are you listening for agreement? So level 2 is listening for understanding, which is where I think in a high-stakes conversation, you at least need to start the conversation. This is listening to try to understand the other person's point of view. And when you start the conversation with a respect for the other person's humanity, regardless of whether you agree with their beliefs or not, and you say, what, they are a human, they deserve rights just like I do, they can have an opinion just like I do, they have the right to their opinion just like I do, they have value just by being a human, then it's easier to listen for understanding. So trying to see, like, get curious. Why is it that you think that way? Tell me more about that. Not so that you can get more ammo to respond, but really just to understand. And this does not threaten your beliefs, unlike most people think. You can listen to understand and understand somebody and still disagree with them.
Do you think when someone enters into this level 2 listening of understanding, looking for ammo, are they really in that state, or
No.
like in this faux understanding?
Easy to get hooked back into level 1 listening.
Yeah.
Right? It's like waves of an ocean. It's not, like stairs,
right?
Right. So I almost wish that they were not like numerically ordered, so that, it was easier to understand, like, these are states that you kind of flow in and out of.
Yeah.
They are all things you need. It's just when you're listening for understanding, what you're not doing is thinking, okay, how am I going to respond to this?
Right.
You're thinking, okay, what's making them tick? Like, what really is, there's something in here. What's causing this?
Yeah.
Really just being open. And I think most people do not enter conversations where they already disagree with the other person, or a high stakes conversation with openness, because it feels like a threat. You have already shut down and become closed and come with your ammo, and you've got the amygdala all lit up. I'm not
Right.
saying you're in hijack, but it's all lit up, right? So it's engaging a different part of your brain that is actually trying to relate and understand, like coming from a compassionate place, and understanding that like we live in a gray world. It is not black and white. Most things are on a continuum. So multiple things can be true at the same time. Depending on the context or the perspective, people don't always have the same goal. So goal misalignment can mean that somebody sees things from a different perspective, and it can still be true. It just might misalign with your goals.
Right.
And I think that's often where we find ourselves. And then there's level 3, which is contextual listening. And this is the one that I have the hardest time with. I think it's the most difficult skill. But contextual listening is listening, entering in with reading the room of how everybody's responding, understanding the position that people have. It's like you walk into a meeting and you already know who's aligned with who and what their motivations might be. And I think it's really important not to get pulled back down into level 1 listening here, where you're already trying to like predispose what people are thinking. But it's more of the indirect communication.
Yeah.
I'm better at the direct.
I do think like that is one of the things that is really difficult. Is it's not just like getting your story or your point across in the words that you use or in the slides that you're using. Like it's that entire piece, and like showing up how everyone needs you to be, because it's a to-do, and to be present for everyone. And even if it's just a one-on-one conversation, like how are you getting it across?
Yeah. I will often ask Ace about this, because he's really good at level 3 listening, this contextual piece. And so often when we have a conversation about something, he'll say, well, I was watching this person and their body language. I was watching this and that. And I'm like, how did you even, how can you take all that information in at once? I can't do that. So I am like envious of that skill, but it is a skill that you have to build. And I do think some people are naturally better at it than others. He's definitely a part of my committee of people that I say, like, I need your help understanding this, because I know it's important, but I also know that like it's not a really strong muscle for me. Sometimes it's understanding where your strengths lie and leaning on other people to help you with those pieces, because they are really important.
They are.
And if you are only like paying attention to what is directly said or not said, then you're oftentimes missing a lot of the cues, because people don't always articulate themselves with words, right?
Exactly.
And we know from active listening, as you're kind of listening with these different levels, when you are actively listening, you are summarizing, clarifying, and reflecting back what you hear.
Exactly.
So that you're giving the other person an opportunity to feel heard, which we talked about calms. That defensiveness creates that co-regulation, but it also gives them an opportunity to clarify if they didn't use the right words.
Correct.
So I know that, some people really feel that they aren't as good with picking the right words. They get really stressed about articulating themselves because they don't want to come across wrong.
Right.
And in those moments, it's helpful to stop and re-clarify what you've heard in a non-threatening way and give them an opportunity to go, did you hear me right or not?
Right. And I do think that's one of though being able to do that does create that opportunity for clarity in case there were like misfires in communication or there was a misunderstanding. Again, being an active listener, it's both. Both people have to be willing to speak up, share, and like, no, that's not what I heard. This is what I understood. Yeah. So I do think like yes, being an active listener on both parts or in the full equation it does require you to be present.
Yeah. It also, active listening actually triggers empathy within the brain. So the parts of your brain that light up for empathy, active listening skills light up those parts. So when you are in a discussion with someone and that they are there actually hearing you, it creates this level of empathy, which creates respect and mutual understanding. So I think that's really important. And like we've talked about, being present and regulated as a listener can help calm the other person's nervous system as well.
Yeah.
So while you are not responsible for the other person's reaction, you absolutely are responsible for how you can influence that. And all you can do is your best to show up, in a way empathetic and inviting. And if you can't do those things, then it might not be the right time to have that high stakes conversation, right?
Right.
And like we talked about, giving the other person the opportunity to know that they are entering that high stakes conversation and what the goal is and be aligned on the goal is important.
Well, I do think I think that may be undervalued more than people think because no, look, we all love good surprises. Just about everyone loves a good surprise, but people generally
don't like surprises.
That's true. You do not.
Not
as someone who came around my corner in my kitchen to celebrate my birthday with me.
It did surprise you. It was a surprise. You were okay with it though, right?
Yeah, I was totally fine with it.
I'm not a big surprise fan.
But I do think people who don't if you need to have a conversation that is potentially high stakes or just say that, be honest with the person so that way they can also say, I can't do this right now. I don't have the bandwidth for that conversation right now. Don't surprise them with it because that again, it's going to just cause could potentially cause a lot of havoc in trying to have that conversation.
So kind of going back to contextual listening and level 3 listening, we know that body language and de-escalation are interrelated. The insula and anterior cingulate cortex, that ACC we keep talking about, they pick up on social emotional cues subconsciously. So they're constantly trying to assess the situation and determine, is this a threat? Is this a safe place? And you're not actively thinking about all of that in that part of your brain that you're tuned into. It's just happening behind the scenes. And this is one of the things I'm not the best at is I'm terrible at it. Understanding how am I showing up physically and what cue is that giving off to somebody else? So you kind of just can read me like a book. I have always been told that. And I'm not really bothered by that so much. But if I'm fidgeting for a different reason, I may not be able to control the fidgeting, but I can at least call it out so that it doesn't become a cue, or make it safe for other people to call out so that it doesn't become a cue that is misread, which is what often happens. My wiggling and fidgeting often gets misread for something different. I think just being able to talk about that is really important. Emotional states are contagious. When one person escalates, the other's nervous system follows it. We know that to be true.
Which is exactly what happened in my example.
Our bodies talk before our mouths do. So tight jaws, crossed arms, rising voices. No, I may not be the best at paying attention to these, but a lot of people are. And subconsciously, do take those things in and respond to those.
And I do think as you get to know people, you begin to learn more about their state. So I remember having this conversation about reading body language with somebody. And it was someone I didn't know super, super well at the time. And I said, well, you kind of seem a little defensive as we're having this conversation. And they're like, well, why do you say that? And well, for one, your tone. But two, you're sitting with your arms crossed. You're not really pointed at me, even though we're sitting here to have a conversation. And it was just interesting to hear their perspective about oh, well, I comfortably sit with my arms crossed. That is how I sit. I'm like, okay, look, I'm not saying that it's not wrong for you to sit that way. I'm just saying as we're trying to have this conversation, I'm not really feeling like we're both in it. So it was interesting.
I do think that not everyone is as connected with how they're feeling and how they're thinking. I talk about me all the time, right? So I often do this thing where I check in with others on how I'm feeling. Usually less directly than that by trying to gain insight into what are some of those things that they're seeing, because I'm not really checked in to that. I think it's really important to remember that you might be aware as the observer of how somebody is feeling before they've really registered how they're feeling. And when you are entering a conversation with empathy and mutual respect, you're not looking for that as a sign of attack, listening for agreement and, that's my point in my debate and I've won, I have the upper hand. It's more like understanding, wow, like you seem really uncomfortable, and maybe not saying it that way, right?
Right.
But like noticing the signs of discomfort, and the goal being, how do I want them to feel at the end of the conversation?
Right.
Like, I want them to feel like I respect them. I want them to feel like I know they're a human and I'm a human. I want them to feel more empathetic towards me, but like putting them on the defensive is not going to make them feel more empathetic towards
That's very
me.
true.
So I can't think of a time where somebody had a debate with somebody else, and at the end of it, the other party felt more empathetic.
Not the goal of a debate.
It's not the goal of it. I'm not saying debates are bad. I mean, hey, I won a lot of medals in debate in high school. I know that surprises nobody, but that I would have a pension for debate. But it's just not, a debate is typically like, if you're not trying to garner empathy when you're having a debate. So some tactics. What can we do, Chris, to help a conversation that seems like it's high stakes go a little, if you'd be a little less like jumping into a lion's jaw?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've said it several times here, and it's entering that conversation with empathy. And that is both in the way that you are showing up physically, verbally, all of the things. Because again, the goal here isn't to be right. It's to relate to someone. It is to connect with them on a level and give you an understanding of them and help them better understand you.
I'm a big fan of writing things down on like 3x5 cards and putting them on my desk in front of me to remind me of things.
Yeah.
And I know you would love me to write down, don't touch the mic. But I think one of the things we should all write down is that listening for understanding does not threaten your beliefs.
So true.
Listening to understand someone does not threaten my beliefs. So just to understand someone does not mean you have to be willing to change what you believe. It just means you have to be willing to see them as a human and understand we're not going good, bad. There are no hero villain labels here. And just because you are saying I am not going to label someone a villain does not mean that you have to change how you feel about something or what you believe, or that you believe that you're right. The world has never been changed by yelling across the chasm at each other. It gets changed through creating more empathy and understanding.
Yeah, I remember when I was a freshman in high school, I went to a public school. And when we entered the conversation of evolution, the teacher made it very clear. I am here to teach you about science and about the science that is mainstream. So I am entering into this conversation and asking you all to enter it with me for seeking to understand, to seeking to learn. You do not have to agree with me. You do not have, but we're not going to debate it. We're going to learn about it. And I just in that moment, I did not have the wherewithal to think wow, what a really powerful thing this person just did. And now later on in my life, when I reflect back on that, I'm like, wow, what a great way to set an intention, to give space to everyone in the room that you may not believe this, but that's okay because we're just learning. We're trying to see from a different perspective. I thought it was a very powerful way that she did that. And I look back now and I'm like, wow, what a opportunity to sit and listen and see that in action in real life.
Yeah. Such an emotionally charged topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is take a pause.
Yes.
So exactly what I did in the conversation with the friend I was talking about earlier. In fact, we saw each other yesterday and we both brought it back up and had a conversation. Much cooler heads prevailed. We were able to better understand and articulate to one another why we felt like get our point across that we were trying to get across, number one, and then number two, better understand like how we got to the state that we were in, because we're close friends and we want our friendship to continue to grow. So we took that pause, but we didn't ignore it. We didn't leave it.
Yeah.
We
Let
came
it
back to it.
fester, become a thing that you then
Correct.
is this like awkward, unspoken thing that keeps coming up, creating tension. Yeah. Which is what a lot of people do. What my tendency can sometimes be to. I know it's so awkward because I'm not a person that tends to like shy away from what I think, but I am sometimes. So acknowledging rising emotions is a way to, you can't always like as much as you plan or prepare or whatever. Sometimes you just get hooked. Sometimes we are at the mercy of the physiology that is happening within us. And we also are not perfect. Like just the people that are the best in this aren't perfect. And so I think when you feel it happening, just acknowledging it is important. Hey, this isn't about you. I am feeling myself like just getting to an escalated place. And can we come back and visit this later? It's not you. I don't think I'm going to be at my best right now.
Right. Well, and I think that right there is a perfect example of like what our next tactic recommendation is suggest taking a break without dismissing the conversation. So in saying what you just said, it didn't say like, I can't talk about this, I won't talk about this, trying to erase everything that just happened. It's just, I need a break and we can come back to this. But I think in those instances, especially whenever our emotions get so triggered, many times people just want to get away from that feeling. Help me stop feeling this way. And in doing so, we can inadvertently dismiss what someone else is trying to communicate to us. And I think just being aware of those types of situations can happen just helps you be more aware of how you say, hey, can we take a pause? Hey, can I have 5 minutes? Just be aware.
What's really interesting to think about is oftentimes we talk about like how you can listen to somebody else without threatening your beliefs. Oftentimes when we're in this space, it feels like only one of two things can be true.
Yeah.
Like there are two opposing things and they're the only two options. And we block ourselves into these, like it's this or that. It's one or the other. And oftentimes there are 55 ways to climb the mountain and not all of them go through the same crossroads, right? And so I think listening to understand really helps to broaden your perspective because both things can be true and there can be a way to solve the problem sometimes where, you are accounting for both things being true. I think at the end of the day, it's really important to remember that the goal of the conversation is not to win. If you are entering a conversation with the goal of winning, then how can it go well? Because if you win, somebody has to lose.
That's exactly what I was about to say. If you enter it with that mindset, then there has to be a loser. And so
now you can enter the conversation with the goal of being heard.
Yes.
With the goal of being understood, with the goal of helping to broaden somebody else's perspective. Though if you are trying to do that, you also need to enter with the goal of hearing. And you get what you give, right? So
Correct.
You don't have to go in saying I'm going to change my mind, but if you want to be heard, it's important to be willing to hear. But if you go in with the goal of winning, which is so often what we do with these conversations, I mean, if you just think about politics in general, for example, it's like one person is right and the other has to be wrong. And the goal is to win. And who wins? Like nobody wins. Nobody is winning. Nobody is happier.
Right. Well, and we've discussed this in the past, where we, as a society, that's kind of how we see things. Winners, losers, first place, second place. We just evaluate that stuff so easily in our minds. It's how we, even with the levels of listening, like you even said, I wish it wasn't a numerical order.
Yeah. Yeah. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Yeah.
Right. Our minds just process stuff. And whenever it's when we kick into that mode of just operating without thinking critically, it's very easy to slip into spaces and feel like there's a villain, hero, winner, loser. It's just
how do you
easy.
Neutralize a threat? You defeat it, right? You win and somebody loses. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the thing is that when somebody loses, oftentimes we all lose.
Yeah.
So rising tide lifts all boats. And that's not to say that there is no such thing as a right and a wrong. And I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying oftentimes we are on the scale of a spectrum. And regardless of whether you think you're debating a topic where there is a right and a wrong, or whether you're talking about a topic where there is a right or a wrong, if your goal of the conversation is to win, you're not going to get shared understanding coming out of that conversation.
Right.
You're going to, your success in that conversation will be to defeat someone. So, imagine, is that really going to get you what you want? I think understanding doesn't mean agreeing. So you can disagree and still respect, still care, still listen.
That's right.
That's what empathy is. Empathy isn't easy all the time, but that's what helps us to broaden our perspective and make things better. And connection thrives on curiosity, not combat. I think that's really important to remember.
And I think that's one of the things that we want to come through very clear in this conversation is like when you are looking for authentic connection, you have to be curious and seek to understand somebody else's story, someone else's perspective, someone else's point of view. Doesn't mean you have to change your mind, change your beliefs, any of those things, but it's in the journey of seeking that connection, it's understanding what makes them tick. That allows for those opportunities.
When we stop being curious, we really limit ourselves in what we are capable of understanding and what we are capable of accomplishing.
Yeah.
And when we're willing to be curious, we really expand what we understand and how we can look at things, and we expand our context. And I think that's how we evolve as humans, is through remaining curious instead of limiting ourselves. So I think that's super important.
Agreed.
We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not perfect at this. I get it wrong probably as often as I get it right.
Yeah.
We don't expect anyone can be perfect at this, but I think the more that we try to have conversations that are high stakes conversations centered around understanding and empathy, the better we will all be for it. And we would love to hear what you think.
Yes, please share with us. Depending on what platform you are listening on, you can leave a comment. You can reach out to us via email at chrisjeninthemorning@gmail.com. You can also leave us a voicemail or text us at 940-278-8129.
Yeah. And don't forget to follow us on social. We are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, just anywhere you are, we are there. So subscribe, follow us, drop us a comment, share what you think. And until next time, be kind to yourself and to one another, and make it a great week.
Bye, everyone.